They're filling out job applications. Like, all right, what are you good at? I'm an artist. Wait, I'm an artist too. Oh no, it's a commentary on Twitter socialists now.
Hey, Cypher here. Propaganda pervades Americans' lives today, bombarding us with disinformation on a regular basis. People can close themselves from the truth by denouncing anything as propaganda. It is so omnipresent that we mistake any media as such. You'll hear smears like mainstream media or radicalizing pipeline bandied about for the sole purpose of ignorance. An easy way to dismiss political opposition as merely propaganda. So Emperor Tigerstar and myself set about trying to understand how we got to this point to better understand what propaganda is. Everyone needs to understand that propaganda is not simply communications meant to argue, advocate, nor protest. The dictionary definition is unhelpful because it easily can label anything and everything that has any intent to persuade, rendering the word only useful for denialism, which perpetuates ignorance. We did eventually come up with a more precise definition of our own. For the most part, we simply operated on how the Supreme Court defined a different form of media with the initial letter P. In 1964, SCOTUS ruled, "I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description, and perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it." The basic idea is that propaganda is meant to manipulate a large audience on behalf of an organization. Even that is inadequate, for false advertising and recruitment ads still fit when they should not. What we took for granted was that propaganda is just as much an art form as a technique, or in other words, it is a genre unto itself. So we treated this as essentially an art history. We watched examples in chronological order of American propaganda movies during a series of live streams over the course of 6 months, after scouring a few popular and scholarly lists. We intentionally increased the iterations as we got closer to the present, all meant for me to eventually edit them into episodes, which this is. Because the recent instances were so important, I've already made the last 4 into episodes, which you can watch after this. You can see by the end of that, we'd grown comfortable with the format, what propaganda meant, and gained a sense of levity from our interactions. But we had to start somewhere, which is what this episode is. As such, I had some technical issues, and we were still sorting out what all of this meant. But it is still fun to learn. The first film we watched was Bolshevism on Trial from 1919. It was indeed a perfect starting point. While propaganda could be said to have existed since writing began, scholars typically date it to World War I. Part of that was the technology required for making posters and videos. Lithography had been around for over a century, allowing large print media, but the industrialization of that process only came in the 1880s. At the same time, slide projectors had become popular, and the inkling of motion pictures were possible. The infrastructure for theaters and film production grew rapidly throughout the early 20th century, eventually centering on Los Angeles, best exemplified by the 1915 film Birth of a Nation, which was the first blockbuster. It pushed the Lost Cause myth, but was not technically propaganda. Though, interestingly enough, it was based on a book from the same author as the book which Bolshevism on Trial was adapted from. Taking advantage of this new technological growth was a new service industry: advertising. Brand managers had existed since at least 1865, but the new mediums allowed the proliferation of these firms. They professionalized around the psychology of influencing people's buying decisions. When World War I broke out, governments sought to use these mediums and marketing strategies to their advantage. Britain created their propaganda bureau in 1914 to shape public opinion around the war, which eventually morphed into the Ministry of Information. Just a week into the American entry into the war, President Woodrow Wilson created the Committee on Public Information by executive order. Led by George Creel, appeal, which essentially followed the British model. They applied the new psychology of advertising to manipulate the public into supporting the war with publications, which pushed Americans to volunteer or donate for the war effort. The Creel Committee had important theorists on it, such as Edward Bernays and Walter Lippmann, who supercharged their public relations agenda. After the war, fearmongering shifted from the actual enemy of German militarism to the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. American troops were already there under a series of foolish protective efforts and alliances, but trying to leave. One soldier described it well, writing, "We were forgotten by our own country, ignored by the one for which we were fighting, and drenched in belligerent blood for a thankless people." Indeed, the United States had turned inward, assaulting supposed anarchists, socialists, and communists with a Red Scare. This mass purge, designed to suppress growing post-war labor solidarity, plunged the nation into bloodshed throughout 1919, utilizing racial massacres, the largest informant network in our history, and secret police left over from the Great War. The Creel Committee remained in effect through much of that year of state-sponsored terror, and sure enough, that's when this movie was released. Its original title was Shattered Dreams, but the production company changed it to Bolshevism on Trial to further the Red Scare messaging, making a perfect first film for us to examine American propaganda. In one way, everything's propaganda, and in another way, we're talking about very specific examples, and we are going to go chronologically in this. We will be trying to decipher what's going on with the times, make fun of it a bit. We've got some pretty funny examples, and to see how it's evolved and become kind of more pervasive and more convincing. How would you define propaganda before we get started?
Any sort of media that's trying to convince you of information.
Well, wouldn't that make all of our stuff propaganda? We're ultimately making an argument, right?
When I say like convince you of information, I guess I'm implying that like there's a spin to it. Whether you know it's good, bad, whatever the reason, it's not just 2 + 2, it's 4. It's like, did you know that 2 + 2 = 4 is good or bad? Because, you know.
2 + 2 is 4. 2 + 2 is 4. I can see why this is so popular.
For instance, there was this old Stalinist poster that was during the Cultural Revolution, not the Chinese Cultural Revolution, the Russian one in 1929 to 30, specifically says 2 + 2 = 5. 2 years plus 2 years plus the enthusiasm of workers equals the 5-year plan. But today we're not talking about Soviet propaganda, we're talking about American propaganda. I don't think either of us have watched today's examples before, so we will be skipping forward because both of them are an hour long. Mine will be Bolshevism on Trial, which came out in 1990 during the Red Scare. We're going to be stumbling through this together. Let's head on in and see what it's like. From the novel Comrades by Thomas Dixon. I should have known this ahead of time. Thomas Dixon is this person who wrote Birth of a Nation.
Oh dear. Like if you had to make a list on people who have like ruined our understanding of history.
The thing he's most famous for is The Klansman. That was the name of his book. The Birth of a Nation was the name of the movie. I think The Klansman came out in like 1905, 1910, somewhere around there. The Lost Cause was already a pretty prominent feature. It just hadn't been popularized in the North. I blame historians mostly for The Lost Cause. People like Woodrow Wilson, right? Which, by the way, this movie came out while he was president as well. I don't know if he had anything to say about it. He was probably comatose.
All right, well, Congress is like, blah, blah, blah. And he'd be like,
Colonel Henry Bradshaw, a brain worker whose inventions have increased the comfort of his generation, created work for thousands of employees, brought wealth to himself.
We're honestly lucky that this film even still exists. It's something like 50% of silent films are gone now. Society of Girls join the Reds.
Oh no, they got the Goyle. Norman Bradshaw, the colonel's son, much like his father in ideals and talents. Robert Fraser.
They're introducing the people, okay.
What's it all about, Dad? Barbara Alden is going to speak at a radical meeting.
Well, Dad, it'll be a good speech.
The outrage. But the Goyle's gone crazy. If these long-haired talkers got control of the government, they'd ruin my business and throw my men out of work.
Wait, he's calling women long hairs. Think about how long hairs would be used in like the 1960s and 70s.
Long-haired freaky people need not apply.
Just go back in time and go, in the future, the derogatory term we use is blue hairs. Why? Because they're old? No. They actually dye their hair blue.
Whoa!
Meanwhile, they look at pictures of Civil War people and go like, no, that doesn't count.
Professionals don't wear beards, and it's like God wears a beard.
Jesus Christ, God has a beard.
It's setting up that the industrialist daddy is going to be the one who's like going to have to basically save the kids from their, silly radical ways. Lots of things are wrong in the social system, Dad, and maybe Barbara sees further than we do.
You're supposed to get a reaction out of that because he's implying that a woman might know something about politics in 1919. Arguing with father again. Why do you cross him?
Herman Wolf, a professional agitator. But Wolf's type has emerged in every social revolution, the strongman who exploits the sincere ideals of less aggressive people, turning social discontent to his own advantage.
It's kind of a surprising loss of maturity how at least when we started doing Red Scare stuff, at least it was like, oh, they mean well. They're just being tricked. But now it's just, they don't even bother with that pretense. Everyone's just a spawn of Satan from the beginning.
The radical left. The radical left.
Who's radical left?
The radical left lunatics.
As with most anti-communism, it ultimately comes down to anti-labor. Catherine Wolfe's wife lending her wit to the furtherance of his plans. And I will point out this movie came out before Emma Goodman was deported, and you can notice that there's kind of, look at these evil people, shouldn't we do something about that? I feel I can't rest until I've found the remedy to capitalism. Is a motherly sympathy for those unable to care for
yeah. So, silly woman, I understand that you want to take care of people because your destiny is to be a mom, but let's not think too hard now. The 3 times that they've mentioned a woman is smart, 2 times it was naivety, and the other time it was, oh, well, she's evil.
There's also a social context in terms of women being smart and capable. That would mean that they might have the right to vote.
No! In the year of our Lord 1919, such degenerate futures are eons away.
This movie came out before the 19th Amendment had been approved in Congress. This is early in the year. This was made basically in response to the Seattle General Strike. When they're talking about, oh, women, they can't possibly be equal. If they get political, then they, lose their motherly attributes and all that. Like, those are direct talking points from the anti-19th Amendment folks. We can already see how propaganda weaves its way into the narrative to reinforce talking points. I think we could skip forward a bit because it's basically establishing she's an inherently good person just being led astray by these agitators. Basically, your bleeding heart liberal stereotype.
Instead of helping those in need, why don't you join me so we can exploit others together?
To buy our island, we'll take money. If Comrade Barbara could persuade some of her wealthy friends to help.
So the communists want to buy an island.
So they're actually going to buy an island off the coast of Florida and basically set up a commune. And it's going to go horribly awry, For a whole thing about, on trial, there's, no trial in this movie.
Well, it's because the trial is in their hearts, Cypher. Gosh.
Okay, so this is, a socialist meeting, which was actually quite popular at this time.
Who accepts with difficulty. Oh, workers teaming up. I guess I have to accept that notion.
We shall have balls. Balls.
Oh, so overall... it's that type of commune. But we've got the biggest balls of them all.
They're discussing the plan to buy an island and basically institute their own commune, but you can also tell that they're purposely giving it this vaguely aspirational language rather than any kind of specifics.
It's in here, you rapscallion.
Everybody else is laughing at him. We all believe in brotherhood and all that. Yes. And now he needs your money.
I am once again asking
for your financial support.
Literally using her to get money to buy their own, like, private island.
That's what communism is all about. Privatization and purchasing islands. Unlike capitalism, which is about neither of those things, ever.
Notice how much of a focus they're putting on how this is just about money.
Oh, the humanity!
Look, she even did the, like, cross.
If these were real communists, this would immediately cause a bunch of infighting, and then they'd never get anything done. Our social system, perhaps is wrong, but here's a chance for me to find out.
That is very Kennedy. Okay. I'll get the money somewhere else. Oh, he just got disowned over communism.
I mean, to be fair, that would happen a lot more in the next coming decades.
True. He'll get his island and a lesson along with it. That's the theme of this entire movie, right?
In a way, it's not anti-communism so much as anti-communism, it seems like. They're not really talking about the philosophy of, like, Marxism or anything. They're just talking about the idea of, a collective society. Because, like, this is before the Soviet Union had formed in 22. The war is ongoing, so I guess, like, the French Commune is still the main example that they have, I guess, right?
The development of the industrial proletariat is conditioned by what other development?
The development of the industrial bourgeoisie.
Good, yes, it is indeed. Man, your final question. Who won the English Football Cup in 1949?
The workers control the means of production. These...
Get out of here. No one leaves this show empty-handed, so we're going to cut off his hands.
But this is also during the Red Scare of 1919.
And there'd already been a ton of different communes and whatnot within the United States for a century at that point.
I just looked up the book it's based on. Guess what communism he's referring to?
So it's not Paris?
No. I kid you not. It's California.
Oh my God.
This is about California communism.
To be fair, at this time, California was voting red.
Oh, as in Republicans, yeah. California was a Republican stronghold.
Get that communist Joe.
The upright guy who's refusing money?
Oh, he is Southern.
He's a Confederate veteran. Of course he is. We are talking about Thomas Dixon, who happened to be roommates with Woodrow Wilson in college.
Oh, God.
Well, that's part of why Wilson was so supportive of Birth of a Nation. He knew Dixon quite personally.
Oh, here's some casual racism right there. The colony's going to fall apart as soon as there's a non-white individual there. Just you wait and see.
Me, Team Indian. Oh, my God. I bet this guy, Wolf's police record, would read like a ghost story on a dark night.
I mean, look, for something from 1919, it could be way worse.
They are very much depicting them as like a bunch of, socialites who are now going to attempt socialism.
This is the problem, not against communism, but against champagne socialism. You gotta have some working class people in there to set them straight.
That is kind of the actual message. We have founded our little colony. Yay! But there'll be enough trouble in the month, so this mob will recognize its real leader. So they're already conniving.
We've got our Napoleon the pig.
The rich guy who basically helped fund this whole thing, they're going to make him leader, but, he's going to be so terrible that they're just going to overthrow him. Point here being that they don't know what they're doing.
And there's already a bunch of bad actors and yada, yada, yada. Well, you see, the problem is that it falls apart once you factor in human nature.
It's the red flag. Red. It's red.
They're filling out job applications. Like, all right, what are you good at? I'm an artist. Wait, I'm an artist too. Oh no, it's a commentary on Twitter socialists now.
He's like, yeah, I know I'm going to be doing all the work.
16 men and women want to go on the stage. We can have no theater, no arts or sciences, until we've saved up enough surplus production to support them. Not one offers to wash, cook, or plow, build sewers, or weave clothes for our clothing. We need heroes and heroines of labor. Who will volunteer? Ask not what the commune can do for you.
They won't volunteer. You have to draft them. Each comrade will be assigned the work he or she is best fitted for. Slackers will be something. I didn't get the last.
Disciplined.
Disciplined. Ooh. party discipline.
You can't put that stuff on us. Ah, but you signed the contract.
This is a step towards tyranny. Unwilling labor is slavery.
Oh no, freedom has become slavery. Orwell did it again.
So notice that Wolf is starting to like use the unpopularity of this. No position will be beyond my reach. So like he's very much like being portrayed as like having a Napoleonic complex.
Wolf becomes the boss and goes, all right, I'm going to pay you for your work. And now as your company boss, I'm demanding that you work or else you'll starve. Wait a minute. Oh no!
The night before an impending food shortage, and they're just dancing the night away.
I'm almost just expecting them at this point to go, we need to grow the population, so let's ration out the women.
Stop making predictions, okay?
Why? Is that actually happening? Oh my god.
They have to pay their rent, and somehow being unable to pay a rent disproves communism?
No, that's pretty consistent. You know, that's why you kill the landlords. Yes, the problem with equal pay for equal work. Some guy's not as good as me. That's not fair.
You gotta have wages, big wages, so no one eats.
You've got to keep some people poor or no one will be happy.
You know, you people are nothing like the communists they show on TV. We now return to the communists.
About to have some fisticuffs. Oh,
Yeah, yo.
he did the thing!
The help does all the work while the top chef just stands there. That totally never happens in capitalist kitchens.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
Of redbaiting.
So basically forcing the workers into accepting their low wages and everything through fighting and that. Because that's totally not something that happens under capitalism. I showed him some of the beauties of communism.
Just naming your fists, the beauty of communism.
Now they're going to go with Comrade Wolf as the leader because they're discontent over wages and how everything's been run thus far. The wolf is the leader of the sheep.
Comrades, we can spread the Red Brotherhood over the world and come to power and riches.
Oh no, Trotskyism, it begins!
Remember, Trotsky is currently the leader of the Red Army. Organize the Red Police. Here's one of the most common propaganda tropes right here. Police, anyone who disagrees with us is how the enemy is portrayed.
Oh, wait, I thought it was bad that they disbanded the police. I'm confused. Is police good or bad?
We will practice the doctrines of communism. Religion, the opiate of the people, is abolished.
No!
Here it is.
The marriage laws will no longer bind us. Divorce will be on application. The state will raise the children. I promise absolute freedom.
So they're creating their police state. They're disbanding marriage.
And everyone was just immediately happy about it. Yeah. No hesitations, no nervous looks. They're all just totally into it instantly.
But soon we'll be back on God's country and run a social experiment in our own little home.
They're talking about sex.
Now the conniving guy, gather up all the firearms. A few of us can control the rest and get rid of the ones who won't submit.
I don't know what you're talking about. This is just a good guy with a gun enforcing law and order.
That's a baby with a gun.
We will confiscate the lease. To prevent your escape from this island, I mean to shut you up.
So remember, this is the rich guy. He owns the lease.
Under your system, these deluded people would starve and die as they did in Russia.
Direct call out to what's happening in Russia. This is 1919. The Bolsheviks have been in charge for a little over a year. Darn commies going after landlords.
Pearl. You don't have to raise your voice.
I put you on the street.
Pearl.
I'm gonna smack you.
Now they're starting to get worried about the island being in trouble and all that, and he's going to start maneuvering to, help his son. Power without conscience. And then it shows Wolf. Tonight, I declare my divorce. I'm just going to frickin' go with that other chick that I like. And now it's 1898 at Hawaii. I mean, no, it's 1919 Catalina Island or something.
Sorry, just gotta save the girl from, like, forced marriage and that. Back to the land of laws and decency. Now what about your ideals, boy? Aside from being a good citizen of the old USA, I have only one ideal now.
America!
You have been under surveillance over a year, Androvich. He was a commie spy.
So America let it all happen?
You know, we're gonna let people hang themselves with their
own
yes, rope.
Right. Lower that flag! Ain't that America, you and me. Ain't that America, the home of the free, yeah. And no communist pinkos.
Oh, and everybody's like, yay! This whole thing we've been dedicating our lives to just got thrown away. So that was Bolshevism on trial. You know, we can already start to see some patterns in terms of how propaganda works, right? World War I had been kind of the birthplace of propaganda. The Creel Committee had kind of pioneered how we do propaganda. So that's often viewed as like the beginning of propaganda. There's a possibility that the CPI actually funded the making of this film. So this might actually be Woodrow Wilson propaganda. Like,
disgusting.
Wilson!
And so we basically just saw the first time that propaganda wasn't used for war usage or anything, but straight up just trying to convince the American public of something. So that's why I thought it was really important to start off with this one. It shows so much of what propaganda will become, but also you notice how it's doing more convincing than you would think, right? Like there's all that stuff about how, oh, these are just kids led astray and all that kind of stuff.
They're dipping their toes in the water, so to speak. It was just as hilariously bad as I expected it to be.
It's not as bad as I thought it would have been, you know?
For me, it was exactly what I thought it would be, especially because like when it comes to silent movie era stuff, there's already kind of the tropes of like silent movies that you already kind of expect in your mind that we find silly now. That mixed with talking points you've heard a million times before, but worse because it's from 100 years ago.
Communism never dies. Communism is a cancer sleeping, awaiting the moment to devour our freedom, to devour democracy. You're thinking this guy's just some right-wing paranoid reactionary who had a horrible upbringing and whose father beat him every day with a Bible. Well, maybe that's true, but it never did me any harm.
This is the era of the most blind, innocent patriotism and stuff like that, where, you know, it's like, ah, yes, America. And you can already hear the distorted trumpets or whatever, you know.
It literally ends with a flag raising.
If I were to have made a bingo card of this, I would have gotten a blackout.
This is the origin of that.
The competence in terms of like actually making a film, then sure. That indeed looks like it was professionally done by the standards of the time.
The story itself wasn't bad. It was kind of rote to us because we've heard this a million times, but that's only because we've heard it a million times from this. Like, this is where it starts.
To the uninitiated, yes, I'm sure it was very convincing. Just like the story of the train going towards the screen, like, caused people to, like, panic or whatever.
That's probably false.
Oh, no. I fell for propaganda?
I wouldn't call it
the
propaganda.
Power of movies. Believe our propaganda of our powers. You can scare old Edwardian ladies.
So the next one that we have is Reefer Madness. You want to introduce this at all?
Marijuana. Ooh.
The next film we watched was Reefer Madness, but that will have to wait for the next episode. With Bolshevism on trial, we can see the first inklings of what is to come. Some of these tropes seem cliche today, but they were unfamiliar in 1919, forming the basis of much of our media landscape today. This reveals the manipulation of public discourse through mass media that is highly inaccurate and inflammatory. The standard redbaiting rhetoric about violating some inane human nature and secret provocateurs bent on destroying America, and an appeal to patriotism to prevent any form of labor solidarity. It fits the times and likely received funding from America's premier propaganda agency. Despite the negative aspects of its messaging, the genre began with so much power. The storytelling was already fairly strong, and weaving a manipulative argument into that narrative worked well. Sure, it's not convincing with a century of hindsight between us, but it was impressive for its time with plenty of room to improve. And sure enough, it would. Be sure to subscribe for more, as well as to Emperor Tiger Star, which is linked in the description. I'm going to keep on going through the rest of these, so see you then.